which is what I want to share today. I'll read the whole name of it officially because it's a good name. The book you can tell I like it because the pages have actually come out of the book. Um, Brisket braised in pomegranate juice with onion confit and pomegranate seeds. So I guess the first thing you asked, Mark, was, is this a very complicated and futzy recipe? And the answer is yes. It is an exceptionally complicated and fussy recipe that takes a really long time to do. And I always do it in phases. I have like a first day, second day, third day kind of process that I do for this brisket. But the story for me that sort of part of the reason I love it and is endearing to me is that we walked in, and as we got there, and it was like famished because I just davened all of Rosh Hashanah that day, and I'd taken a little nap, but I was still exhausted because of how much crazy work it is. And Jane Cohen, the author, she says, "Oh, so great you're here. I'm just putting the brisket in the oven." So we're like, oh, great. So the brisket did not make it to the table until 10:30 at night. And I, of course, was like terrified because I'm thinking the whole time I'm thinking in my head, well, I have to be up in the morning for second day Rosh Hashanah to do the whole thing again. So let's get going on this brisket, which meant it had to be really good in order for me to really love it as much as I did. But it turns out this brisket is something that I have kept with me, and I now make every year for Rosh Hashanah. And you can see, like it's a lot of to do, right? Just seeing the ingredient list by itself, it's a lot of ingredients. But the flavors are extraordinary. The pomegranate symbolism on Rosh Hashanah, right? That connects us with the Sephardic Seder for Rosh Hashanah that has all these different symbolic foods. It's incredible. And the meat the meat always cooks perfectly every time. It's never come out tough. I think because there's a fair amount of vinegary, and there's stuff in the recipe that will sort of attack the meat from the inside while it's cooking. And it is truly a beautiful dish, and it's just filled my table for years. I'll say the part of it that like the stages of it is sort of gives me also a rhythm to those days of the preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Obviously, I'm a little busy usually in those days leading up to the holiday, and there's something for my sort of psyche when I'm crazy and I feel my hair like shooting out straight out from my head. The thing that I do that brings it back to my natural curl is to make complicated food. Actually, that just cooking something that has 1,000 steps and sort of alchemy of it really centers me, and it feels like control over an out of control world. And so though you might think that the Cantor who's making a big Rosh Hashanah dinner is going to basically do things that I can throw in the oven, be done with, and then there it is. It's actually exactly the opposite for me, that like the moment of making the onion confit for this, that like, you slice the onions teeny tiny, and then you have to cook them forever. Like it's in this wine, it's amazing. And it takes a long time. And it gets me ready for the moment.
That's so lovely. That is so lovely. And brisket at 10:30 just seems so very Manhattan, you know? Like, we'll get to it. We got no place to go. We'll get to it.
Jane is the ultimate New Yorker in that way, I'll say.
That's funny. So thinking about your family, the household you grew up in, are there any recipes that have the memories there, but the recipes vanish that you wish you could get back? Like my mom tells this story of she and all of her first cousins wanted to learn to make kreplach from her grandmother. And so they went over as adults, not as children. They went over as adults, and everything was done. It was all that was left were just for the grandchildren, all in their 20s, to pinch the corners. And that's all. So they never learned to make the kreplach. So any kind of memory that something along those lines?
And my family did not have much of like Rosh Hashanah foods that were like sort of such a standard Rosh Hashanah food. For us, all the traditional foods are Pesach foods. And there's two things on Pesach that are things that one I can't have because I can't have it, and the other one because my grandmother lied to me. So I'll say the first one is my mother's brisket that she made for Pesach for years and years and years. And I did not grow up in a kosher home, and understandings of kashrut, just a different world of where I grew up in. And one year, I remember it was like February, but my mom is the kind of cook who she starts cooking for Pesach in January, February, and then freezes everything in the garage so that the Seder, it's all ready to go like 2 weeks before. So it was like February, and I'm at my mom's house, and I smell, and I'm like, oh, that's your Pesach brisket. I haven't smelled that in years. What is it that makes it, what is it that makes that smell for your Pesach brisket? She was like, oh, it's beer. Right? So my kashrut for Pesach does not include beer, but hers does. It's not bread to her; it's liquid. And frankly, now she's a vegetarian anyway, so she wouldn't even eat it herself. But so that's one food that I don't have anymore because I wouldn't. And the other one is actually my grandmother, my father's mother, was always in charge of making gefilte fish for the whole family. And I begged her for the recipe for years. And finally, at one point, she wrote it down on these cards for me. And she was like insisting. She's like, some of these people put sugar in it, but I refuse. I put no sugar in my gefilte fish. It's very important. Okay. I make the gefilte fish. And it doesn't come out quite right. I bring it to her. I'm like, can you taste it and see what would you do? What should I figure out? Whatever. And she tastes it right away. She says, well, you didn't put any sugar. So rather than passing on the precious family recipe, she deliberately lied and wrote things wrong on the cards so that I wouldn't get it right, so that it would never be as good as hers. Oh, that's who I come from.
That's really rich. So tell me something. You mentioned the tablecloth that you have that's special. Is there anything else that you want to share with us? I don't know if you have the tablecloth that you can show the way you showed the cookbook, but is there something else that you want the congregation and those that are part of this to know?
I don't have a lot of amazing objects from my family. It's not, we're never like a stuff family, is the truth. So for me, it's more about thinking about, honestly, after the meal would be over, and I just remember sitting there with my grandpa at the table, my mom's dad, and he was a futzer. So in my head, I just see him holding on to whatever bottle was on the table. It could be a mustard, it could be a ketchup, it could be a something. It was in his hands, and he would always be tossing it from hand to hand while sitting there and enjoying the conversation going on long after the table was cleared. And it was sort of, let's just say, gender roles being what they were, it was very important to him to sit at the table the whole time and wait till everything else had happened around him. But there's just something
after the meal was just to get up and go to the family room.
Exactly. But so it's just that the memory of just sitting around the table until you sort of not even going to the family room, but really staying at the table and just playing with the stuff. He would just play with the stuff from the table to keep himself entertained while we were just there. And as kids, it didn't seem to be that remarkable that my grandfather stayed that long to talk to us. But now I think it is, right? I think that's really so it's not an object. It's just the feeling of staying around the table and being there as long as you can.
Oh, that's lovely. So let's flip away from food for a minute or two and talk about some traditions. Some traditions that maybe you or Dror have brought with you and incorporated into your families. Maybe some new traditions since you've come to Chicago or been part of the Anshe Emet community. When you hear those questions, what pops into your head?
Look, I grew up in a family that we loved Shabbat. And we were a Friday night shul family. We were not a Saturday morning shul family growing up. So Friday night dinner wasn't really a thing for us that much because we were going to shul. Yeah. My mom was always in charge of arranging all the dessert platters. So I actually almost never, my whole life growing up, even though we went to shul very regularly on Friday nights, I almost never heard a sermon. because as soon as the sermon would start, that was our signal to go out and get all the platters ready for Kiddush afterwards. I have no idea what the rabbi ever said. But so really I think the central thing for my family that is really definitive that my kids know is just sitting around the table for a Shabbos dinner is sacrosanct. You know, and actually like now like it's hard now, given that, you know, sometimes we're working. So I don't get home until like 8:15 on a Friday night. And then I have an 8-year-old kid who's having a dinner at 8:15. And I remember actually when we were first thinking about having a kid, and we were, you know, people are all obsessed about staying on schedule with little kids and with babies and toddlers, and how important the schedule of bedtime is at this time every what. And remember, we talked to Rabbi Sharon Brous at ICAR in Los Angeles about it. And she said, you know, living on the schedule is a really great way to parent, and it's really true. And we made a decision in our family that Shabbat was just more important than the schedule. So if it means that we're not having dinner until 8 o'clock on Friday night, then the kids are crazy and it's wacko and it's wild and it disturbs the whole rest of the week. And we're not a scheduled family at that point, and nap time is ruined and everything is ruined. But we have Shabbos, and that's the most important thing. So that's really for us the central tradition that I think my kids know more. Even Avi, you know, who's only a year and a half, knows something special about sitting at the table for a meal that is different from the rest of the week.
Oh, that's so sweet. That is so sweet. By the way, there's got to be a joke in there about, you know, never listening to a sermon has prepared you to be a cantor or something like that. I'm not sure, but
I heard lots of songs.
so we could, we got to think of the joke, and if anyone can put one together before the end, put it in the chat box and we'll figure it out. David, we'll come back to you if there's some time. I want to make sure that everyone, that the Rebbitzin have their chance to talk as well. So we're gonna transition to Rebecca. Rebecca, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. It's so good to be here and to see everyone on the screen. It's really nice.
It's so good to see you. Welcome to our kitchen table chat. I'm gonna go the same way and start with, you know, like, we're preparing, we're getting ourselves ready. And so as you get yourself into that mindset, is there a recipe that you can share with everybody that's special to you, especially as it relates to the holidays coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of different recipes that come to mind, and some more creative or new recipes we've come up with in the last few years. But the one that really comes to mind for me is my Bubby Sarah's carrot ring. So my Bubby Sarah was my great-grandmother, my mother's mother's mother. And actually all of the firstborn women on that side of the family are all named after the matriarchs. So I'm Rebecca, my mother, who I think is on this call. Her name's Rachel. My grandmother was Leah, and her mother was Sarah.
So sweet.
And yeah, it's nice. It was actually accidental until it got to me. And then I think my mom realized that we had 3 out of the 4. That was part of how she chose my name of Rebecca. So she made this delicious carrot ring. It's a sweet side dish. It's actually not the kind of side dish I usually make. Usually I keep sweets for the dessert, but it's Rosh Hashanah. So I love having a sweet side dish, and it's sort of a cross between like a cake and a kugel, I guess. And at its best, it's crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. And it's a really delicious dish. And it's one of those things where the way that she made it is still lifted up on a pedestal. She died a while ago when I was in high school, but everyone has always struggled to replicate the recipe, and it's never quite the same as Bubby Sarah's. It's never quite the same. It also is one of those recipes where you hope it holds together okay. So you make it in a ring pan, and then there's always that moment of truth when you're getting ready to serve it onto the table, and you flip it onto the platter, and you just hope the whole thing doesn't crumble and fall apart. And you don't know until that very last moment. And most of the time, at least part of it crumbles. And I always feel very proud of myself when I can bring it out whole and in one piece and still looking beautiful. And everyone in the family is always impressed with anyone who can kind of keep it together. I don't know what it is about the recipe, but it always seems to fall apart. And one of my the funny memories that I think of with this recipe too, the first time I tried to make it was right after David and I were married. I was right out of college, actually. So I was in my 20s, very young, not a very experienced cook. And we were living in Israel for the year. And we decided, because we both came from families that had big holiday meals, that what we should do is host a really big Rosh Hashanah meal. And we invited over a lot of kids who were in Israel for their gap year. We probably had like 15 people over for a meal, which at the time was, I think, a little ambitious, given that we had no idea what we were doing. And so we tried to make all of our favorite family recipes, but of course we were living in Israel. So everything was on the metric system and we had no idea where to find the ingredients. So one of the ingredients in the recipes is vegetable shortening, or Crisco. I didn't even quite know what that was at the time, to be honest, but I remember looking for it, and my mom always told me it has to be Crisco, it can't be margarine, it can't be butter. We were eating meat anyway, so we wouldn't have cooked with butter, but it had to be Crisco, and we couldn't find it. And I just remember like so wanting to get the recipe exactly right. And I think it came out okay. Our oven broke on Erev Rosh Hashanah while we were in Israel too. Everything was kind of a disaster, but eventually the holiday came and we got to celebrate. And even though it wasn't quite right, we had those little tastes of home, which was really wonderful. So I always think of that story and of my family many generations back and my Bobby Sarah whenever I make that recipe.
Oh, that's great. That carrot ring with David, the gravy from David's brisket on it would be probably just tremendous. So, you know, like on the spectrum for someone like me who can work his way around a kitchen versus someone like my wife who's close to being a master baker and chef, where does it fall? Could I do it? Would I have to count more on Amy Gould to do it? What do you think?
No, it's pretty easy actually. So unlike my wonderful friend David Berger, I like making recipes that are mostly unfussy. You know, it's not super, it's pretty easy. If you have a food processor, that helps to grate the carrots, but you can kind of mix it all together and hope for the best. It's not too tough.
Fabulous, fabulous. So carrot ring aside, which you've incorporated in, are there some recipes out there that unfortunately haven't come down through the generations? They're just nothing but a fond memory?
There's a couple. So one of them is my grandma's gefilte fish. So my grandma just died a few years ago in 2016, and she made a delicious homemade gefilte fish. And we all knew that someone should learn how to make it, but I don't think anyone ever really got around to it. I personally don't really want to make gefilte fish, I'm not going to lie. So it wasn't something that appealed to me, but I do think of her and miss that gefilte fish. And the other one is her chicken soup. So she made, I think everyone thinks their grandmother or their mother makes the best chicken soup in the world, probably. But so to me, her chicken soup was the perfect chicken soup in the world. And I cooked it with her one time, and she showed me what she did, and I tried to replicate it, and it has never come out exactly like hers. And actually, her caregiver, who's really been a part of our family for many years, she babysat a lot of my cousins, and then she's taken care of my grandparents in later years. Her name is Mercedes. She's the most wonderful woman. She's from El Salvador, has been here for a while. So she learned to make my grandmother's chicken soup, and she still actually makes the recipe. And she's now a caregiver for my grandfather. And it's really beautiful because my kids, it's their favorite chicken soup too. And my oldest son, Natan, he got to meet my grandma, and he kind of remembers her, I think. My two younger sons didn't, but it's nice that they know it's Grandma Leah's chicken soup, and they love that Mercedes makes it for them, and they love making fun of David, who makes a great chicken soup actually. But his is second to Grandma Leah's chicken soup recipe. So it lives on, but no one in our actual family knows how to make it.
Oh, wow. So it's good to know that David knows how to make a chicken soup, because I was going to say, if he thinks that his mom or grandma's is better than his wife's, let me know. I'll talk to him, set that straight. But it sounds like his is the one that's in the house right now.
It is. He is the chicken soup maker in the family, and it's delicious, but not quite as good as Mercedes or Grandma Leah's chicken soup.
Got it. Oh, that's great. So when you set your table, and you have this beautiful holiday table out and set, and you're getting ready to host, are there some things on there that you want to share with the congregation? Let them know. what you put out? Anything from families?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a few things, actually, quite a few things. So one of the things that I love, this isn't quite on the table, but goes near the table is, so David's mother, Lonnie, got me these beautiful candlesticks when we were living in Israel for the year, soon after we got married. And we got this beautiful, let's see if I can show you, silver platter that was David's grandmother, his savta's platter that she used to put her candlesticks on. And she, David and I started dating when we were in high school, and thankfully I was able to meet his grandmother, and we were very close, and she was a very special person to me. So I love thinking of her when I light the candles on the tray. And she also, we have this beautiful candlestick lighter from her, which is very helpful. We light 5 candles, one for each of the members of our family. So this is both useful and really special, because it reminds me of Savta, who is this amazing, strong, stubborn, incredible educator, wonderful, wonderful woman. And she was really, really a Savta to me too. So I think of her with those. We have a lot of Kiddush cups. This is one of the very special ones in our family. My parents got this for us as an engagement present. So this is one of the ones that we always bring out on the holidays. And I'll share one more thing that's not from, well, it's from David's younger sister, actually. Some of you know is a beautiful Judaic artist. And she, let me get this right. She made us this beautiful challah cover. It says on it, that we should be renewed for a sweet year. And it's just beautiful with the pomegranates and beautifully sewn. And it's one of those things that I love, because we only use it in the holidays in the fall. So it sits most of the year, and it feels very special every time we get to take it out for Rosh Hashanah.
It should feel so. If we were in a room together, I would ask everyone to raise their hand if they have a challah cover just for the High Holies. I would imagine very few do. So to have something like that, it's pretty amazing. That's really cool. Traditions in sort of like the bigger sense. Are there some traditions that you and David have brought from your families? Are there some traditions that you've started since you've been part of the Anshe Emet community? Give us some insight.
Yeah, sure. So meals and big holiday meals are really a tradition for both of us. When I was growing up, and this is really different how we are now, my family always had Shabbat and holiday meals together at my grandparents' house with my aunts and uncles and my first cousins. And it was every week for Shabbat dinner, every Jewish holiday, no exceptions, always at the same place with my grandparents' house. And we always did Rosh Hashanah lunches there. So we did not do big dinners for Rosh Hashanah, unlike my friend Chazan David Berger, but we did big lunches. After shul, we would have a huge meal for lunch, and dinner was not really a thing. So that's really what we do now mostly too. We do big lunches, but we generally have people over from the Anshe Emet community for lunch after shul on Rosh Hashanah. And actually we still do a meal with my extended family. It's a little too far for them to drive after lunch because we're all really hungry by the time shul ends around 1 o'clock. So we've shifted that to be our first night dinner, and my grandpa and my aunts and uncles and cousins and parents and David's family is usually in town with us as well. They all come over to us for the first night of Rosh Hashanah, and we have a big celebratory meal together. So that's very special for us. The food, the people, the singing, all of that is a big tradition. And I want to share another personal tradition that is sort of not about me and David in our home, but really about me and the Anshe Emet community. So I have for a long time read the third Aliyah on Rosh Hashanah on the first day, which is the story of Hagar and Yishmael when Abraham cast them away and they're alone in the wilderness. And so there's a line in this Aliyah that's incredibly powerful. They're in the wilderness, they run out of water, and Hagar says, Al er'eh b'mot hayaled, like, let me not look on as my child dies. And so I've been reading this Aliyah since I was in high school at my childhood shul, and when it opened up at Anshe Emet, in one of the services, I was able to start reading that at Anshe Emet. And it really took on new meaning for me a few years ago when our middle son, Lior, as many of you know, who thankfully is a happy and healthy, almost 4-year-old now, when he was hospitalized for 5 weeks as a baby. And for the first time, I could really relate to this text that I had been reading for so many years in a new way. And I could relate to this horrible fear that Hagar had of watching, am I going to sit here and watch my child die in front of me? I remember that first night in the hospital, sitting there with David and thinking that. And thankfully, that wasn't the outcome for us, as it wasn't for Ishmael either. But when I read this Aliyah, I can relate to Hagar's pain in that element, in that sort of dimension, but I'm also so grateful that I'm not like Hagar, and that when we were in that very low time in our lives, that incredibly scary time as a family, unlike Hagar, who was alone, who had no resources, who didn't have a family, a community to support her, that we were just loved and supported by so many friends and family, and so loved and supported by the Anshe Emet community. And at that time, we had meals brought over to the hospital in our house literally for months after he was born. We had congregants who were doctors who came to visit us in the hospital to check in on us, to help us navigate the medical system, and so much more. We just felt so lifted up and so loved by the community. So when I read that Aliyah now, which has been, again, a tradition since I was a kid, I really think about how grateful I am for Lior's health and for our family and our family's health, and also just how grateful I am for this incredible community that when we were in that really low place, we felt so loved and supported and lifted up by all of you.
Oh my God, that's so moving. Thank you so much for sharing that. Janet, I don't know how we transitioned from that story over to you. Rebecca, that was beautiful. Thank you. But we're going to transition. So
I should have taken up your offer to go first. There's no
right. We could have finished on that. Drop the mic.
Yeah.
Janet, thank you for
Beautiful.
joining us. And so I'll start with you the way I started with the others, and a recipe that you could share with us.
So I sent Amy 2 recipes, and they actually, they're reflective of our meal, but they're not necessarily reflective of the way I cook, because like David, the more complicated and the more copious, the better. Even when everyone says you don't need this much, and I'm like, you can't tell me not to do there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and my work doesn't really provide me with that. So it's very, when I can't, even during here, and I haven't cooked a ton during the pandemic, but there was a point where I just got up and baked something because I needed to have a little creation. So one of the recipes is the antithesis of David's brisket recipe, which we actually have, David, because Emma either ate it or heard about it, and so Dror sent it to us. And I looked at it and I thought, I'm gonna make this for Rosh Hashanah, because, and then I looked at it and I said, no, I'm not making this for Rosh Hashanah. But my brisket is, it's evolved over time. It is probably a foodie's nightmare, because anything you're supposed to really do when you cook meat, you don't do with this. You just, it's somewhere. So I took it from a friend a long time ago, and I have changed it, and so now I make one of the modifications on Rosh Hashanah, and the other one I make on Pesach. But I've started actually using the Pesach one on Rosh Hashanah. It bothers me because I like keeping things separate and special, but I just like it better, and I think everyone else does. But that brisket is I want to make a different brisket, but everyone wants this brisket. So that is the brisket. It's just you sprinkle vinegar, you mush all these ingredients, and Amy can send it together. The Rosh Hashanah one has beer, David, and the one on Pesach has not beer, but I use kosher for Passover ketchup and apricot preserves and brown sugar, because that kosher for Passover ketchup has so much vinegar and so much sugar in it that it pounds through the meat. And it's, I have to say, I could really use another recipe, because I've made it so many times, and I must make 8 briskets throughout, for Rosh Hashanah 4 and for Pesach 4. And this year, actually, because of the way the year was, we had a Zoom Seder, and a friend of mine, I don't remember how this came about, but I told her, don't go buy brisket, I'll bring you some. So she wrote to me after the holiday was over, and she said, I tasted that and I started crying because it's a friend of ours who comes every Rosh Hashanah and every Pesach, and it just was such a memory of togetherness. And so I can't change the recipe. That is our Yom Tov brisket recipe. So that's that recipe. And then I also make a plum kuchen, which it's actually easy, but everyone loves it. And Dina asked for it for one of the desserts for her Shabbat dinner, Friday night dinner before her bat mitzvah meal. So it just makes me feel good that our kids always look forward to this, and it's pretty and it's sweet and good and not complicated. The rest of my recipes are more complicated.
Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Are there any recipes from your family that have been lost?
You know, the gefilte fish one is lost. And then I thought, who am I kidding? I opened up the pot once and there was the fish head, and I ran out of the house. So that's just would never, I can't do that. My father's apple pie recipe actually is something that I know what he did. I can't do it. I can't replicate it. He usually did not love when he cooked, but this apple pie was unbelievable. And he made it one year, and it was for breakfast. And there were these two gorgeous apple pies sitting there. And it was torture, just because when we came home and we couldn't eat. And I can see him, because everything with my dad was a production, and flouring the counter and rolling and whatever, slicing. I have to say he would be appalled by the way I sliced the brisket, because his was perfectly sliced, but mine not so much. But so I really miss that recipe. My mom is a great cook, but there's something about that apple pie that I would love to have a taste of today.
Oh, that's nice. That's
Yeah.
nice. So as you think of your table that you lay out for Erev Rosh Hashanah, or Shabbat or Pesach or whatever, are there some things on the table that you want to share with us that are special, that are generational, anything like that?
This is generational from the generation below us. I don't know if you can see it. This is just Dina painted this honey pot when she must have been 3 or 4. And so this comes on our table every year. And then unbelievably, Michael and Emma were in Haiti, and they found this beautiful wooden honey pot. So which it's beautiful, and it just was in an unlikely place. So I love that. My mother, I didn't take it out. My mom bought Michael and I a beautiful challah board of wood and silver challah board that comes out on Shabbat and on Rosh Hashanah. And I would say it's not an heirloom, but my mother imparted to me this love of dishes. So there is any opportunity I can to buy serving platters or dishes is something I just love to do, and I think of her every time I do it, because there is such an embarrassment of riches in terms of dishes and platters in her house that I grew up watching her look at things, and so I got that from her, and I am really very grateful for that.
Oh, that's so lovely. That's so lovely. Are there some family traditions that you want to share with us, and some things that either came from your family or from Michael's family that we may want to know about?
You know, that's so interesting. A lot of my answers are go back to David. Pesach really has more traditions for me, because it's the family around the table, and this was coming home and eating lunch, and a lot of my family wouldn't drive, and we were far from them, so we weren't together all the time. But I just forgot what I was going to say. But Rebecca, that's the 5 candles. My mom, we have 5 growing up. I have a brother and a sister, so there are 5 of us. And my mother also lit 5 candles every Shabbat. And so that it was so lovely to hear that, because I just thought that was such a beautiful thing to do. And so it's nice to know that.
Oh,
I think
that's
it's beautiful
nice.
that you guys do that too. But the traditions, I think, are, Mike, we've been married a while, thankfully. So our traditions are having the Siegel squish, I call it. We have our dining room full of people on both days at lunch. So we do lunch. And you would think we've never done this before, because I would say every year before I set the table, we get out the tape measure, which way's longer, which way will more fit, how will we do this? It is really somewhat pathetic at this point that we continue to do this every year, but we finally came up with the boardroom look where everyone can face one another around a perimeter. So there's a lot of empty space on the table, but and I hold my breath every time everyone squishes in, literally, that there's going to be a chair for everyone at the table. But standing in the kitchen getting ready and hearing people come in and saying hello to one another, and usually on the first day it's the same group of people, it just makes me so grateful that it's there again. And then when we say Shechianu, and Michael and I always look at each other. It's a prayer that has taken on more and more meaning as we've been together, and so it just fills up the table.
I can't imagine it not. I can't imagine it not. So you have a perspective that Rebecca and David don't have. Have some traditions changed as the family's gotten more distant? I was going to say smaller, but more distant, and with competing, with time, just and space not always being accommodating.
Thankfully, we usually have at least 3/4 of our kids home at any time combination, and they continue to come back on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So for that, we are very grateful. And we do share time, so it takes scheduling, but I would say no, we're just older, so the things we do, and mostly again at the Seder, there are some things we still do, and all of our little wind-up frogs broke, and people are upset that they can't throw them at each other anymore, and these are the adults, not the kids, that are upset. But no, I'm gonna say no. I think it has just grown each year into, because we've done it so many times, that it just feels like Rosh Hashanah, and it smells like Rosh Hashanah in the house. I start cooking with chicken soup, and then the brisket, and Michael always comes in and says it smells like Yantif in here, and so it's just the beginning of our seat. Well, no, I would say the sermons probably start first, but it's the beginning of the celebration of or the observance of the holiday. So yeah.
That's nice. All right, so I'm going to ask a question that wasn't on our pre-script because I want to get some inside baseball. And so Rebecca, David, Janet, all of you, give us a little bit. So David, you're working, so it's a little bit, my question's a little bit different, and it may not be as applicable for you, but all of the rest of the congregation, our spouses, our partners aren't working. And so help us understand, if you can, how the experience is different being the spouse of a working partner. And David, I'm just boxing you out because you're working too, so you might have a different perspective. But Janet, I would love to hear from you, and then Rebecca, if you could chime in.
Oh my God, there is a level of intensity that is probably difficult to describe, particularly on Kol Nidre, right before it. I think that it might be the most stressful of all the days. But working on the holiday that's something that has changed. When our kids were younger, thank God we sit in the second to last row, because we weren't always the quietest, and we could make a quick escape out the door. They're better now, but I can't use the word lonely because I'm so filled with pride sitting and watching Michael and seeing him at work, but really it's not work. It's work and it's not work. It is definitely more falls on whoever is the one in the household. And there are times I, would, there is a level of stress and there is a level of beauty that is, they just go together. And holding your breath before the sermon starts. But there are all these little things. But it's a gift to be the spouse of a rabbi. It's not easy all the time, but it's a gift, and particularly on Rosh Hashanah, just surrounded by so much love in the room. I'm gonna so miss seeing people who we don't always get to see, and just being part of this as a community. But I am sure the minute we get off of here, I will say, oh, I know what I should have said. It's hard to answer this question
Well, I put you on
because it's so multifaceted. So I would say it's intensity combined with pride.
That's nice. Yeah. And I'll say this, Rebecca, before we go to you, it is, from my perspective, sitting in the sanctuary, it's always very sweet and endearing when he comes off the bima, to see him sit with you for however long he can.
On Yom Kippur.
On Yom Kippur, yeah.
Yeah, that is, I was gonna bring that, that is really, it is a real treat. That is very nice for those 10 minutes out of the day. Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. All right, Rebecca, you're up. You're at the plate. Give us some inside baseball.
So I everything you just said, Janet, really resonates with me a lot. It's such an intense time and also so beautiful to be part of the community. One of the things that I love is that my kids are so comfortable at Anshe Emet. Even though now we haven't been there in a few months, they still feel it, the community. And so on the high holidays, we tend to bounce from room to room, and they like going to see their Abba on the bima. They love coming to the sanctuary to hear the shofar blown. They don't love staying in their kids' rooms and tend to kind of somehow make their way out and back to me. But they just feel so comfortable being part of the Anshe Emet community, and I love being able to go to all the different services with them. And for me personally, one of the times that I love most through the high holidays is Kol Nidre, actually, because it's the one time when I usually leave my kids at home. My wonderful dad loves to babysit on Kol Nidre. He used to stay home with us when we were kids, and my mom would go to shul, and now he loves staying home with my kids. And it's really nice. It's the one time that I go to shul without my kids and can have some of my own moments to really connect with the liturgy. And I go in Blum, where David is on that evening, and I get to actually hear one of his sermons in full and not just pieces, and hope that my kids don't cry and we need to leave the room. So it's just, it's really special to be able to hear him and learn from him and hear the other rabbis. It's just such an incredible community to be a part of. And as Janet said, it is hard and lonely at times, and I will miss everyone this year, and will be very different this year being alone with my kids those mornings on Rosh Hashanah and not being in shul with everyone.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really, really different. And I think we can talk about that in a minute. Hopefully there'll be time. David, I should let you have a chance, right? Because you have this perspective of two working parents on the high holidays. So what perspective do you have?
Well, usually I'm fortunate to have my parents come and be part of the team. My parents live here in Chicago, so it's easy for them to come in. And usually on high holidays, it's an all hands on deck moment. Since I'll say the calendaring and the scheduling up to the half hour usually is the essential piece of how. But the great piece of that for us is once you sort of know the contours of what's going to happen, then it's just press go. Right, and that feels, kind of, it's almost like the days before Rosh Hashanah are sometimes so much harder than actually the day itself. Because the day itself, we're just playing through the things we've already figured out. Right. And I think also for us, the fact that we have the second night dinner means that, like, we come back from our davening obligations on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and who has to go to Tashlich, and who has to lead this, and who knows what. And just that feeling of like everyone coming together, because usually like my parents are there, my uncle usually comes, and other friends are coming, and it's like sort of like the house starts out with just like usually like a babysitter and kids, and then like soon like parents are in, and then before you know it, the house is like really full, and that rhythm. It's hard for Dror and I that we don't get to see each other do our best work very often. So that's something that we came to terms with a long time ago, that sometimes I'll get to watch him practice a sermon. And since we've been doing streaming of our holiday services, especially for a few years now at my synagogue. So when something's really great, I'll make him watch it later. So right. So that's part of our thing is knowing for each other what is something important that we want to make sure that we are able to share, and figure out the way we can do it.
That's sweet. All right, I'm going to do around the horn a question from Julie Ross, which is a really interesting and poignant question, which is, what will you do this year to make the holidays special in such a strange time? You're first, David. Even that look speaks volumes. The other two have a chance to catch get their thoughts together. But if there's anything you can think of, it would be sort of fascinating to know if there's some things you've talked about and articulated.
We've been talking about trying to figure out how we can try to have a nice Rosh Hashanah dinner. And our apartment building has a roof deck that has really lovely seating. So we're wondering if we can figure out a way to have like separate tables so we can like enjoy a dinner, and have to be really early, and might not be on Rosh Hashanah, it might be like the Sunday after, like it might be something like other time that we would usually do it, but some way to try to create that meal experience and give the kids a chance to see their grandparents. And even like it's complicated and difficult and not clear if we're and the weather can ruin it in a second. So really our focus as a family has been on figuring out how we can try to create, honestly, the meal for Rosh Hashanah is really center for us of what we're trying to think creatively about with the kids.
Janet, you want to go?
Sure. Well, we won't have to measure the room for the table, which is sad. But we will have a lot of the same food because the house has to smell like the holiday. And oh my God, it's been such a year of figuring out how to make everything special. We haven't really gotten to the nitty gritty of the family part of it. I'm hoping we can have a child or two in the house with us, and some of them eating with us on Zoom, and having a few minutes to take a breath and saying that Shachianu, God willing. But it's tough. It's tough. So we'll do our best to have it feel like the holiday to the best of our ability, but it's going to be a lot quieter.
I think for all of us, it's going to be a lot quieter and a lot of contemplation and just the strangest of days. So, Rebecca?
Yeah, just to echo that, it's hard. We have not figured it out yet, and I think it's hard for all of us to figure out how to adapt right now. I'll share on a personal level, one of the things that I just started doing is studying once a week with a chavruta, with a study partner. We're looking at some of the different high holiday liturgy together through a structured study program. But that we did it the first time today, and that's just been really meaningful for me. I think knowing that on the actual holiday on Rosh Hashanah, I don't know how much time I will have to carve out for my own prayer, being with the 3 kids while David's in shul. And so it's been meaningful to try to bring some intentionality to the month of Elul leading up to Rosh Hashanah, and to be finding meaning even before the holiday. So that's one thing that I've been doing. And I think similarly, we we don't know if we'll be having meals with anyone other than the people in our household, which is very strange, but I'm definitely planning to cook some of the favorite recipes and try to make the meal special. I'm a little embarrassed to say that our dining room table has been covered with Legos for the last month or two. At the beginning of COVID, we would still eat Shabbat dinner at the dining room every week. And then we would, get a little bit more lax and a little bit more informal. And so I think just bringing back some of, bringing out some of those beautiful serving platters that we love to use and some of the favorite recipes and finding ways to make it special, even if it's just us.
Oh, that's nice. I will close with this. On behalf of the congregation, knowing how difficult it's been since March, and knowing that your spouses have been in just overdrive, thinking about how to change what's been done, how to make things meaningful still, dealing with all of the changes and their pastoral duties. It has to have been just incredibly, there must have been times that they've been more distracted than usual, more distracted than how do I get my sermon done? And the stress level that they have felt and that they've had to deal with had to come home in some way, shape, or form. And so you probably don't hear it, you can't hear it enough. So on behalf of the congregation, our thanks to you for being there and being the support network and dealing with the stress, and our thanks to your spouses for what they're doing to enrich the congregation. Really, just a thank you from us to your families. And well, I'll leave it at that, and Amy, give you the last word.
Well, I was going to see if Rabbi Siegel wanted the last words.
Oh, great.
No, this has been
no.
lovely. Thank you. It's just been lovely.
I just want to say thank you to all of our participants and to so many of our congregants for hopping on today. I wish everybody just a wonderful holiday season. We have so much going on in this synagogue. We are here for you in every way that we can possibly be. And we want to thank you all for being with us tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Bye, everyone.